Hello and welcome to College Chit Chat, a podcast that casually discusses community colleges as an integral part of higher education. The purpose of our show is to expand the perspective of higher ed enthusiasts, especially those in or soon to be on the job hunt. We are your hosts, Sonina Hernandez-Mickelson and
Daniel Mickelson.
Well, as you can tell, I am a little...
We are rip, roaring, ready to go this morning. She's about to introduce some alternate hosts. Surprise!
We've had a busy few weeks, which we'll go into detail about in a little bit, but that'll kind of explain my scatterbrain. But yeah, let's start off with some updates and things to look into. So, Daniel, have you ever been interested in STEM and community colleges?
Personally, no, but I think it's a great idea. I don't have a STEM brain, sadly.
All right, well, if you're interested in this, we do have a book recommended for you. It is called On My Own, The Challenge and Promise of Building Equitable STEM Transfer Pathways by Julie Wang. Sorry, my apologies. Let me just read you a little bit about the book.
Sounds
and then kind of the description of it. We'll talk about kind of my experience with the book and then a bit about the author. So, let's see here. It's the first book of its kind, and it provides a detailed on-the-ground examination of the difficult paths, curricular, interpersonal, and institutional that students must chart through community colleges. She follows 1,670 two-year college students over 4 years as they begin their STEM programs in the Midwest and documents their educational and life experiences as they move toward or away from the prospect of transferring to a four-year institution.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Their stories reveal that they were on their own, left to navigate the pathways to transfer without meaningful institutional support. The book makes painfully clear, and I think that's kind of the hardest part here, painfully clear, that the current state of transfer acts as a mechanism that perpetuates and worsens inequalities in educational outcomes.
Whoa.
Dr. Wang, I'm sorry, I keep saying that wrong, and I apologize. Dr. Wang argues to cultivate an equitable STEM transfer pathways, culturally relevant and responsive supports that are accessible, welcoming, and validating. Validating must be put in place at the institutional level and appeal to the talent, motivation, and unique needs of historically marginalized students.
Yeah, no, I feel like we both experienced that and seen it in our own work, even that difficult pathway of transferring into a STEM program at a four-year institution.
Oh, for sure. So as we've mentioned in previous podcasts, both of us worked at Purdue. I now do not, but Daniel does. I work specifically within the College of Health and Human Sciences, very STEM heavy. Most of the students I worked with were looking at going to professional schools. And I mean, not bashing anyone or any program or anything, but Purdue is not transfer friendly.
No, it's not.
It's not,
especially on the STEM side of things. I feel like it is a little easier on the humanities side of things, but STEM especially, credits just aren't accepted. They're viewed as not as good as Purdue's or what have you.
Term is equivalent.
Yes, there you go.
The hard sciences are very strict on their transferability, and often it would come in as elective credit. Like the students that I worked with, they'd be kind of annoyed that they would have to retake some basic level science classes, and be told that to be viewed as equal or up to par as other students who started at Purdue per se, they would have to retake some of those classes to try and be considered or whatever.
That's
so,
tough.
So I think that she's definitely hitting on some points that are overlooked oftentimes, and these students are working just as hard and are trying to get to the same outcomes, but just took a slightly different educational path. So a little bit about my personal experience with the book. Super easy read. I felt that she was able to express the important aspect of research, but I didn't feel like it was like in your face research, hard to like understand, and what are all these things, like
deep dives into her methodology.
Yeah, no, like she was really storytelling.
That's awesome.
Of the experiences of these students. And I think that's what made it such an easy read, was that literally she's just like, this is what they told me, so hear what they have to say. Yeah. Like, it wasn't like this, you know, they told me this and interpret this way or whatever, and then kind of like, I don't know, this is my critique sometimes with academics, is that it like switches over to a higher level of reading and understanding when it comes to research.
Right.
But I genuinely believe that she formatted it this way, of just being like, these are real people, these are real experiences, these are experiences that some of you might be experiencing yourself or had experienced, or like if you're in the field need to understand these students are experiencing this. So I think that the language, the format was like super well done. Like I said, I breezed through this book in just a couple of days. Like, it was that good, and I was so interested in it. I also, on a personal and professional level, she does pinpoint quite a bit about the role of advisors in this book, and the how do I say this, and the lack of support that students received. And I will say that she also does point out that, like, not everything should land on the advisor's plate, right, which I do appreciate, because I think many institutions are abusing advisors in the sense of, like, oh, you're facing the students every day, so you're the go-to of, like, sending the message and giving them the updates on policy, and you also have to know about their personal lives, and you have to report if they're struggling, and you have to, you know, help them reach out to everybody else and their dog about, you know, resources and programs and all this stuff, and everything is always just like, oh, dump that on the advisors got it. And so she does talk about, like, they're overworked, they're overburdened, you know, they're doing as much as possible, but also because of all of that, they're missing a lot of these students, and they're missing the ability to actually advise and help them. And it also kind of crosses over with advisors at 4-year institutions, not just the 2-year institutions. Yeah. So kind of like, where's the responsibility, and how can advisors improve, and where are you lacking? So I know I took quite a bit of notes in the sections that she discussed about that. Other things that kind of really stood out to me in the book is, obviously, she talks about, like, the inequality in STEM fields, and there's a whole chapter about, like, women in STEM and what that looks like, and the experiences of the women that were at these 2-year institutions and going into STEM fields. There was a little bit of chat about mental health and the impacts of that. Let's see, what else was there? Accessibility, both with, like, students with disabilities, or just in general, like, other accessibility things due to, like, financial status, or through access of resources and things like that. So I think that she really hits kind of the bigger things that sometimes, I don't know, are brushed under the rug a bit, I believe. Like, kind of the things that, you know, are there, but not a lot of people like to, you know, put on the forefront. For sure. So, and I thought it was really important, because you hear marginalized, and often you just think, like, POC, right? Like, people of color and stuff. And so I think that she really reminds people, like, you have to expand your knowledge about what is marginalized and what are some of the issues, and that these statuses, like, these identities, stack on top of each other. And so you might have multiple things that are maybe possibly hindering a student from being successful and moving into their programs and things. So I don't know, it was really cool. A little bit of about the author. So she is on Twitter, so if anyone wants to follow her, again, Dr. Julie Wong, and it is at Julie Wong 1. So XUELIWANG with the number 1. A little bit about her is she is a faculty member in the School of Education at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And this is just a little blurb that I stole from their website, but it says her research is aimed at identifying practices, structures, and policies towards transformative change for optimal educational opportunities and equitable outcomes. She utilizes mixed methods and was awarded the Transfer Champion Catalyst Award by the National Institute for the study of transfer students in 2021.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
So recently I was able to sit in on kind of like a lecture class session where she presented and was able to chat with us and stuff. Super fun, super casual, like just very easy to connect with, and some surprises for me from hearing her speak. This is not her like typical research. She used to deal quite a bit with quantitative versus qualitative, so this is kind of like her first deep dive into that.
She plunged right in,
right,
1,600 students.
Well, and like I said, like I would have never known with the way that she wrote her book, like it just seemed so fluid. So I'm like, yeah, like, and she discussed about how both kind of tell a better story and picture of everything, that she has that. Other fun facts that she kind of like talked about was like higher ed and education wasn't necessarily what she was originally going into. She was like actually in English, and shifted her path a little bit.
There we go.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was kind of cool to hear about her path and how like things have changed and her interests have changed, and she, you know, adjusted her educational path and outcomes, and then her professional career as well, as things have popped up. I'm definitely excited to see what other projects and information she comes out with, because I don't know, I just think that this was really cool for me to see, and I think she was very straightforward. And like seeing her personality now, it just makes me kind of chuckle even more, because like she was very direct in her book about like things that faculty are not doing right, things that advisors are not doing right, but at the same time being like, okay, I acknowledge, you know, X, Y, or Z, but you know, there was definitely moments where I was like, oh my goodness, she went there, she said that, I can't believe it. You know, kind of those hidden things in higher ed that you're like, we just don't talk about that.
Brush that under the rug.
Yes, yeah. So I don't know, it was just nice to be like, man, she just said it, and like, it's out there. So
no, I mean, hearing you talk about it, I think I definitely want to read the book. And this is going to be very nerdy, but one of the reasons I want to read the book is because a big thing in qualitative research now, like the big push, is elevating the voices of the individuals in the qualitative research instead of just subsuming them in the voice of the researcher. Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like she did a really good job at elevating those individual voices in her storytelling process. And I'm a big nerd for that, so I think I'm going to pick it up and take a look.
And I don't know if this is it or not, but maybe it's her English background of storytelling and being able to, you know, stick to the narrative that's being told to her. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, I definitely highly recommend. Like I said, it's a fairly easy book to read and get through. You know, I don't even remember how many chapters there were, but it's not many chapters. So definitely take a read, especially if you're interested in engineering, you know, anything in the health related field, math, physics, sciences, that kind of stuff, because I do think it would be beneficial for you to know if you're considering working at a 2-year institution or even just being at a 4-year institution in those areas, you know, and understanding maybe some of the struggles that students have gone through and transfer students will be going through, and talking to your departments about it. So yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, that leads us into the main part of our episode for today. First, before we dive into that, there are a few updates. Nina kind of hinted at the beginning. We've had a busy few weeks. We have been, like we talked about before, we've moved to Florida. We're in Florida, but it wasn't until this week that we actually moved into our apartment, and so we were apartmentless for 3.5 weeks.
Yes.
While we waited for it to get prepared. And so Nina started her new job at Lake Sumter, as you all know, a full 2.5 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And so we were living out of an Airbnb for 2 weeks.
Yes. Living out of our suitcases. Yeah. We were jumping from Airbnbs to my parents' place as well. And for those of you who don't know, we do have a little one, which we reference to as our butterfly. So our butterfly was with my parents when we were packing up our house in Indiana. So they were down here, 2.5 weeks prior to us even getting down here. And then once we moved down here, we stayed a week with my parents, and then we left our butterfly to go to Claremont, just so that we could work without having to entertain them and to, just let them have fun. So we were going Sunday through Thursday in Claremont, and then we would go Thursday nights to Sunday night back to where my parents were to hang out with our little one. So it was very back and forth, very inconsistent. And if anyone out there who has kids knows that you need to have a routine, and this was not a good routine.
Not routine. But they're a trooper, done super well. Very proud of them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it has been pretty intense, and this week especially, moving into the place, getting it ready.
Yes.
Birthday parties. The day after we moved in, it was our little one's birthday, and so we had to decorate around all the boxes, and it's been interesting.
Yeah, no, it's been very interesting. And I mean, July in general is a busy month for our family. Like, literally both grandparents, both you and I have birthdays. Our little one has birthday.
Aunts and uncles.
It is a big month. It's better than Christmas for us. So
a lot of cake.
But yeah, so all of that to say, we've been swamped by a million and a half things, plus like family excited to see us here. Yeah. And so it's been a lot.
And in addition to all of that, Sonina was also going through her onboarding process, which is what we're going to focus on in this main part of the podcast. She had a 2-week hyper busy schedule for her onboarding process that I'm going to ask her some questions about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess let's just dive in. Can you just walk us through what your onboarding process looked like, just in general?
Yeah. So the very first part of my onboarding process actually started in late May. So after I had agreed to, accept the position and move out here and everything, they requested for me to visit HR. And they did plan that for early June. However, we mentioned, we're going to be down there looking for a place. Can we adjust this? And they said, sure, absolutely. So they did accommodate us since we were going to be here slightly earlier than what they wanted to do the onboarding for, or like the HR session. So they did adjust that. I had to sign some paperwork. I had to, just the typical like tax forms, the, direct deposits. They were setting up my email account, that kind of stuff. This was the first time that I've done like an HR session where it was like somewhat of a group session.
Yeah.
Pros and cons with that, in my opinion. Like, it was cool to get to know other new hires right off the bat. However, like, I just wasn't informed that was going to be like a group session. So I did bring you along. Because
I was just hanging out, asking questions too.
Yeah, no. So the reason I brought him along was because we had questions about like the medical insurance and things like that we wanted to discuss, because we are now kind of split, because your insurance is through Purdue, my insurance is through Lake Sumter. We were trying to figure out what's the best outcome for our little one. So we were trying to navigate all of that, which was a little bit tricky to do in a group setting. And again, like, we just didn't know that's what that was going to be like.
Yeah, we just had hyper-specific questions just for our particular situation, and so not necessarily, the whole group did not need to know the answers to those questions.
Right, yeah. And I mean, they were very accommodating and allowed you to sit in and stuff, and we were able to take some time afterwards and things. But yeah, it was just kind of like, again, without prior notice, that was just a little bit, oops, sorry. But so that, again, it's just different institutions do different things. Yeah. I had never experienced a group setting like that, so that's why I just assumed, you can come along. So that would be one thing. Like, if you are part of HR or hiring someone, like, let them know, like, what's going to happen and stuff. And I do believe they said that they were trying something new-ish. So.
Yeah, they had mentioned that.
Yeah. Another thing that I signed, which was like the first time I ever had to do anything like this as well, was the oath for like the state of Florida Constitution and things like that. I had never had to do anything like that before, where it pretty much just said that I would like uphold the like legal laws of the state and that, uphold the Constitution of the state and stuff like that. It was very interesting. And then after I signed it, they asked me, like, if I fully was able to read and understand what I signed, and then I just had to accept that I did, like, sign this oath. Again, that was new for me. Didn't ever know.
I was like, I mean, yeah, we're not planning on breaking any laws, but sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, that was just interesting, you know, and I don't know, I guess the term oath holds, like, heavier context sometimes, but it's not like I had to raise my right hand or anything like that. It was just literally, like, I signed a paper and they're like, oh, you understand this, correct? So, but yeah, so that was new. So that was that first day. I got my ID card that day as well, took some, you know, your picture and printed that out, which, fun fact, I guess that ID cards are pretty new for Lake Sumter. They didn't have these previously. So, again, just a difference from, like, all my previous institutions. Like, ID cards were just, you know, standard. Yeah. So they were all excited about, like, we now get ID cards. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm excited for you. But, yeah, so that was kind of cool. And that was at the main campus in Leesburg. Okay, jump forward a few weeks, and I am starting, my first day was June 21st. The weekend before I started, I did get an email from my direct supervisor. They informed me of, you know, what time to show up, where I was showing up to. They sent me a schedule of kind of like the week and things like that. And of course, they said, you know, if you have any questions, let me know. Right off the bat, one thing that I noticed was the lunch hours were shorter. And I was just like, oh, like they were like half-hour lunches. And so, like, reached out and I was like, hey, like, I just noticed, like, this is, you know, something I noticed. Is this for a reason? Is this how it always is? Like, you know, I just want to know so I can plan accordingly. And they just mentioned that because Lake Sumter has Fridays off during the summer, so it's, like, mid-May to the end of July, they have to work slightly longer days. And one way that they do that is they cut that lunch hour in half, so you kind of get that. So that was new to me. Again, never experienced that before, so.
The reason we were so concerned is because we are annoyingly adorable and try to eat lunch together every day. And now we have a half hour less.
Yes. Well, it's just we've always worked at the same campus and stuff, so we always just had lunch together. So, but yeah, so there was that. And then, you know, obviously just kind of like introductions and things like that. It was a very, very busy schedule. So come... June 21st, Monday. I arrive, get there, and meet with my direct supervisor, and then am pretty much just bouncing around for the next 2 weeks from office to office of meeting people.
Yeah, it was wild. Like, when I saw her meeting schedule, it was wild because she met with everybody. Yes. Like, like the Dean of Undergraduate Studies, the... director of this, the director of that. I
had a rep from IT. I went to the person who runs the testing center and tutoring services. They had me speak to the advisor for it's like their dual enrollment health program. It's like a specific program, and they can either start in like 9th grade or I think 11th grade. And so they had me talk to that person. They had me talk to the associate dean of the math and science department. I spoke to the dean of general studies. Just basically everyone and anyone. Our academic, so the vice president of academic affairs, which is what advisors are under, is academic affairs now. So he stopped by and had a meeting with me in my office because he's the direct report of my direct supervisor. And so, like, again, this was all very different from my previous experiences. Like, they were literally having me meet with everyone across the different campuses versus, like, four-year institutions, like, sure, you meet your team and probably the people that you're going to contact frequently, but you're not talking to, you know, the people in HR rep. You're not talking to IT. You're not talking to, like I said, the learning services and stuff. So it was just very personal in that sense. And these were all one-on-ones. Like, this
wasn't like group settings for a whole group of individuals.
No. So it was fun. You know, I was able to get to know about their services and resources and offices, but I also was able to get to know campus better, definitely, from walking to place. I mean, it's only 4 buildings, so it wasn't like terrible, but like still getting to know campuses, their offices, where they're located, that kind of stuff. And then it also allowed time and space for just personal conversations. So I was able to connect with people about, we were talking about like farmers markets, Broadway shows, things to do with the kiddos and stuff like that. So it was kind of fun to just like talk and see like, what do you like to do around town? And seeing like where their offices generally are and some of their stuff that they like to do in the area and things. So.
And for me, it was a genius onboarding process, especially for an academic advisor. Because as an advisor, you have to refer people to everywhere for different issues. And if you have that personal connection, it's always so much easier. But usually it takes months, if not years, to build all those relevant personal connections in a 4-year institution, because you only interact with these individuals every like couple of months or so. And so they don't really remember you until you've been there for forever. Mm-hmm. But for Sonina, she met everybody in person within the first 2 weeks. And so I feel like it really facilitates that community and that connection building that you need as an academic advisor. So I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I think, so, I mean, talking about like pros and cons, in case anyone is out there who's in the position to like plan these onboarding processes. The one thing that like, okay, there was like 2 things. So one of the things was COVID, right? Like I have been working outside of my office setting for over a year. So it was a bit of a shock to come back and like be physically in an office, let alone like meeting tons of people.
Right.
And I know that like states are doing different things, institutions are doing different things, but like Purdue was very strict, or at least our team was. So like, you know, if we were ever in the office, all doors were locked. Like, students could not come in, period. People could not come in unless you knew they were coming in. And then that's it. I think we were only there for a few weeks doing that. After that, they're like, nope, go back home. And then we were home the rest of the time. So I hadn't, like, been in direct contact with colleagues or things like that in a long time. Yeah. And when we were, everyone was masked up. Florida has been a little bit more lenient, I would say, with some of those things. So the first day that I get there, it's just like what it was before. And so it was a little bit of a shock. I didn't really have the, like, ability to kind of, like, ease myself back into working in an office environment. And then all of a sudden throw me into meeting people, right? You know, after not being around people for so long, that it was a little bit of an adjustment and kind of being like, okay, and then, you know, not, again, going from a campus that was very strict about like you have to wear masks and things like that, and going to an area and campus that is very lenient on that. And you could tell some people wanted to wear masks, but like, you know, they didn't say anything to me and stuff. So I was just trying to like gauge and be considerate of, sure. You know, like who wants a mask, who doesn't want a mask. You know, if I didn't feel comfortable in the areas that I was, you know, wearing a mask, then, you know, then I would put that on. So just kind of that. And so that's like a very specific thing to like our current time. I don't think that's an issue generally, but just something to think about. The other thing that was challenging for me, so I identify as an extroverted introvert.
I was about to mention this. So
I am, you know, like a homebody. I re-energize when, you know, doing my crafts or just being by myself and doing kind of things of my interest on my own time. But I definitely know how to talk to people. I can do presentations. You know, I can work a crowd if I need to. It's just not my natural state.
She can turn it on.
So I can put on a show. It's just not my natural state. And then being constantly in front of people and talking to people and things like that really drains me. And so this was 2 weeks straight of just literally back-to-back appointments meeting with people, which, I mean, I've done as an advising, but it is very draining, especially when you're meeting new people. And the other thing was, like, the schedule, like I said, it was literally back-to-back, so I wasn't given, like, 5 minutes walking time or 10 minutes walking time or things like that, which kind of made it tricky because people would use their whole allotted time because they're given, you know, like, you can give your spiel and talk to them from, let's say, 9 a.m. to 10, right? But then my next appointment starts at 10, and it might be, you know, at the next building over or whatever. So then it's like a 2-minute walk to get there. You're already kind of running late. And then, you know, they go there full time, and then you're kind of running late again. And also keep in mind, like, because you didn't have those, like, slight breaks in there, if I had to run to the restroom or just, like, take a breather for a second or something, like, you're late. Mm-hmm. And I don't, like, everyone was super accommodating or whatever. And when I got there, you know, if I had to, like, step out for a moment, you know, I said, like, hey, can I take a moment? But it is, you know, it's kind of weird to somewhat show up a few minutes late and be like, hey, can I please take a moment to, like, run to the restroom or something like that. Yeah. So, you know, that would be my recommendation, is if you're in a place that you are planning these schedules, like, just put a 5-minute break or something, or a 10-minute break. So that way that you can walk comfortably, as well as, you know, provide space that if they need to go get a drink of water or go to the restroom, or just, you know, kind of be on their own to recuperate, like, it's set into place. And I mean, though, especially that first week, like, I was coming home and just, like, zonking out. Oh, yeah. Like, I would pass out and just sleep the rest of the night because I was just drained.
I'd have to shake her awake, shove some food into her, and then let her fall back asleep yesterday.
Yeah, so I think that was kind of, like, my only, like, oh, this was a bit rough.
It was a lot, yeah. But, like, I think for me, what was most, like, I don't know, the weirdest thing to me was just comparing it to our experiences and our 2 previous jobs as advisors and our onboarding processes. Because Sonina's was weird because she was a new hire. Her supervisor had been hired, like, what, the week before you?
No, it was like a month.
Okay, yeah. Fairly new. She was really new. She hired Sonina, so they were both fairly new. And so the onboarding process was more along the lines of, like, okay, come observe me do some appointments. Here's some appointments for you to do. Maybe observe a couple other advisors. And then that was it, really. Yes. Do your FERPA trainings, do your other trainings that you have to do to make sure you have access to everything. Here's a brief rundown of how our systems work, right? Pretty basic stuff. Mm-hmm. Me, I love my supervisor. She is amazing. But she is just very pragmatic. And so I showed up to my first day at work, and she hands me a single sheet of paper and says, okay, here is your onboarding stuff. You should probably do all these things over the next couple of weeks. And I was just like, okay. And so I took that sheet of paper, started checking stuff off, and she was very honest. She's like, I've never really done this before. I was hired, and my co-advisor was hired with me at the same time. I've never hired anybody else, so we're just going to work through this together.
Right, yeah.
Whereas compared to Sonina's onboarding process and her new job, like, it was extremely structured. So just those different, like, juxtapositions was just so interesting.
Yeah, it was structured. And like you said, my previous experience, my most recent previous experience, they were also first-time supervisors. So they hadn't necessarily like managed people before, which is fine. Like, she was great and honestly one of the best managers I've ever had. Or supervisors that I've had. But it was like a learning process for both of us, because that was also me being an advisor for the first time. So I had no foundation on advising. Versus here, with this onboarding process, they also did mention, like, they're not super stressed about my advising stuff, because they know that I've had 4 years experience, and they know that I've used some of the systems that they're using. And granted, during some of my 2-week busy meeting people, some of those were sitting down with some of the other advisors and seeing how they run the system and talking about policies and things like that. But it definitely was not the heaviest portion of what the schedule was. And I think that that's what's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks and things like that. I know, for example, that they've already expressed, like, my next 2 weeks, it's, like, jam-packed with their orientation presentations and stuff that they're doing for summer for fall semester. And their plan is, like, to train me up on that. And then they're like, we pretty much want you to, like, within the 3rd week start. Yeah. So, like, 3 weeks from now, you would be the one giving the presentation and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's kind of, like, what they've talked about. It was really nice having a schedule. It was really nice seeing, like, who am I meeting in advance. So, like, I had that very early on in the week, right? Yeah. So I could go home and, like, look up people on LinkedIn or just, like, online or see if I could find a photo or whatever and just kind of, like, familiarize myself with it a little bit, with who I might be meeting and stuff. So, yeah, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah. And from all this, like, just when you're onboarding somewhere, I think the most important thing is to just be open to how they're going to run things.
Yeah.
Ask questions. Like, advocate for yourself, like, as well. Like, if stuff is just getting too much, like, say it. Speak up.
Yeah.
Be like, hey,
yeah,
I need some
sure.
more time on this. But yeah, for the most part, just be open. Just see how they run things and just adapt accordingly. And then, like, you can build those relationships and shape it to how it's best going to work from you as you go along.
Yeah, I'm also going to say, like, some things to look out for during the onboarding process is start to get to know the politics. People will talk.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised on how open some people were about their perspective and opinions on certain things that have happened at, I guess, the institution recently. And so keep your ears open, kind of hear, you know, what are things that I should be aware of and stuff like that. And I'm not here saying, like, gossip or drama or anything like that, but there are certain things that, like, you should be aware of. And granted, like, they told me this at the start when I started, but, like, from the span of me getting my offer and then starting, the vice president of student affairs got a new position at a different institution. So the president completely, like, removed that position and rearranged the org chart.
Oh.
So that's why we're now under academic affairs,
Right.
when previously they were under student affairs. So kind of understanding some of those politics with change. Some people are all for it and other people are not. And, you know, kind of hearing the pros and cons of that. Like, obviously I'm in a new environment, I'm in a new state, I'm in a new institution. I don't know those politics. And so kind of hearing the ins and outs of all of that. And, like, just knowing people's perspective on it. I would also say that, especially with mine, where, like, I got to know some people very quickly and in some cases very deeply, is getting to know, like, who are your go-to people. Because let's get real, like, work is hard and sometimes you just, like, need someone to vent about a situation, a parent, a student, about life in general. So, like, who are people that are easy to talk to? Who are people that you think aren't going to say stuff to other people? Who are people that you can easily speak with? You know, just naturally, like, oh, I feel like we could be good friends or stuff like that. And just seeing, like, who your go-to for what settings. You know, even with the short time frames that I had with people, like, there's definitely people where I'm like, oh, like, you're my go-to if I have questions about X, Y, or Z. Or you're my go-to about venting about life in general and I see us hanging out after work sometime. Or you're my go-to for, you know, like, maybe getting our kids together and having a fun play date or something like that. You know, like, there's a lot of different components that you can have, and depending on your comfort level, like, some people are like, nope, coworkers are, like, out of the question. They're not going to be on my social media. They're not going to be people I hang out with. You know, it's just, like, work. And then there's other people that literally, like, they're integrated in their own lives. Like, they're your best friends. You see them all the time, that kind of stuff. So, again, that's just a preference, but, like, keep an eye out for kind of those people and how you want them incorporated in your work life or personal life. Trying to think if there's anything else.
Yeah, do you have any other, like, final thoughts for us? We've kind of covered everything that I had thought of beforehand.
Yeah, I don't know. Final thoughts. I would say just in higher ed in general, like, my final thoughts really are, like, we live in a world that's very extroverted. And you know, kind of, I don't know. And I say this during my interviews and stuff. Like, I let people know, like, I am an extroverted introvert, which means, like, I can be, but I am, like, more introverted. And just maybe adapting the schedules that you plan for them that way, or having them be a part of the planning process of, like, this is what we're thinking. How would you, you know, like, get to be incorporated or whatever. So maybe a little bit more discussion on the front end before, like, they actually start. Who knows? I know that is kind of already a busy and overwhelming time for people when they're changing, but I don't know. Having a calm background, I feel like it's better to over-communicate than under-communicate. So,
well, and honestly, I think that's a really good idea, is to involve people in the planning process of their own onboarding. Because, like, it is very rough sometimes. Like, it's a lot. You're trying to learn a new job. You're trying to intermesh with the politics, the personalities, the everything. And so being able to have a voice in your own onboarding process. I'm like, you would have been able to say like, hey, I noticed that all these are back to back. Like, maybe we could build in some like walking time or some bathroom time. Would have been nice on the front end. But yeah, I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, and just, I don't know, like, and I feel like this is something that my supervisor did very well, is just doing check-ins. You know, she would walk by my office and say, hey, like, how are you doing? You know, who did you meet with? Or, you know, are you good? That kind of stuff. And so I definitely do recommend that.
Yeah.
And just checking in and being like, is everything okay? Like, you know, or is there any major concerns? And I have felt good at talking to her if I had extra questions or, you know, had concerns or things like that. So,
Perfect. Well, I think that's about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you have your frizzle quote?
Yeah, no, but I mean, I just wanted to, before we get to that, just thank everybody for joining us today once again. Don't forget you can send questions or recommendations to communitycollege.chitchat@gmail.com or find us on Twitter at, what's our handle again?
At @cc_chitchat.
Yeah, and as my favorite teacher, Miss Frizzle, would say, don't forget to look for connections.
There you go, networking. Cool. Well, all right. We look forward to chatting with you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.